Somewhere in the restricted vaults of the Galactic High Council, there exists a file. Not a war report. Not a diplomatic record. Not even a history. It is classified under a single phrase. Species anomaly, do not underestimate. The species in question has no advanced starships. No intergalactic weapons. No ancient alliances. They live on a single planet. A small, fragile, water-covered rock, third from an unremarkable yellow star, at the outer edge of an average galaxy. And yet, every species that has ever tried to conquer them has deeply, permanently regretted it. This is not a story about humanity's weapons. It is not a story about our armies. It is a story about something far more dangerous. Our refusal to accept that anything is impossible. The Vorkai Empire had existed for over 6,000 years. They had conquered 47 civilizations across 3 galactic arms. They did not declare war. They did not negotiate. They arrived, and they transmitted. Biological designation: humans. Your world has been surveyed and classified. You possess no faster-than-light travel. No energy shielding. No directed energy weapons capable of threatening a Vorkai vessel. You have been designated pre-contact species grade 4. This designation means you have 2 choices. Submit peacefully and be integrated as a labor class under Vorkai administration. Or resist, and be removed. You have 72 of your planetary hours to transmit your response. Choose wisely. The transmission played simultaneously, on every screen, every device, every communication channel, on every continent on Earth. 7,900,000,000 people watched it. Some panicked. Some prayed. Some wept. And in a reinforced bunker 400 meters below a mountain in northern Canada, one woman watched it twice. Then she turned to her team and said 4 words. Give me the files. Commander Asha Reyes had spent 17 years in a program most governments publicly denied existed. Its official name was the Extraterrestrial Signal Analysis Division. Its unofficial name, the name her team used late at night, over cold coffee and blurry whiteboards, was the Listening Post. For 19 years, the Listening Post had been intercepting alien signals. Not communicating. Not announcing themselves. Just listening. And writing down everything they heard. 19 years of alien transmissions. Navigation data. Energy system frequencies. Weapons calibration signals. Shield harmonic patterns. None of it was meant for human ears. But Reyes had very good ears. Within 3 hours of the Vorkai transmission, Reyes had called every division head in the facility. She did not ask for opinions. She asked for status reports. Torres. Holdfast status. 14 of the 20 nodes are fully operational. The other 6 need 31 more hours of calibration. They gave us 72 hours. We have time. What's the resonance coherence? At 14 nodes we're sitting at 61%. We need all 20 online to hit the 80% threshold. Below that, the pulse doesn't propagate far enough to reach orbital altitude. Asha, even if we hit 80%, we've never tested this at planetary scale. We don't actually know it works. Reyes looked at her steadily. We know the theory is sound. We know the alien signal data confirms the harmonic frequencies. What we don't know is whether we have the courage to try. Get me all 20 nodes online. That's the only variable I want to discuss. Project Holdfast had begun as an energy transmission concept. The idea was elegant in its simplicity, a network of gravitational resonance nodes spread across the planet, capable of transmitting clean energy between continents without a single cable. No satellites. No power lines. Just resonance. But 5 years into development, a junior engineer named Yuki Tanaka had noticed something in the math. Something no one had put in the proposal. At full planetary scale, above 80% coherence, the resonance field would generate a subquantum electromagnetic pulse. One that propagated outward from the planet's surface, past the atmosphere, all the way to orbital altitude. And that pulse would cause cascading system failure in any technology operating on the same base harmonic frequencies. The same frequencies the Vorkai had been broadcasting for decades. The same frequencies the listening post had spent 19 years documenting. In other words, Tanaka had discovered that Project Holdfast, their clean energy grid, could be used as a weapon. Not a conventional one. It would not destroy a single ship. It would not fire a single shot. It would simply turn everything off. Race. Even if this works, we disable their fleet. Then what? They have backup systems. Emergency power. They'll be back online within hours. 6 hours, based on their own maintenance transmission logs. So we get 6 hours. And then they fire on us anyway, but now they're angry. No. We get 6 hours in which they are completely vulnerable, and we are not. 6 hours in which the conversation changes. 6 hours in which we stop being grade 4 and start being something they've never encountered before. We're not trying to win a war, Admiral. We're trying to win the right to be taken seriously. Admiral Juan stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Get me those 6 hours. Race. Even if this works, we disable their fleet. Then what? They have backup systems. Emergency power. They'll be back online within hours. 6 hours, based on their own maintenance transmission logs. So we get 6 hours. And then they fire on us anyway, but now they're angry. No. We get 6 hours in which they are completely vulnerable, and we are not. 6 hours in which the conversation changes. 6 hours in which we stop being grade 4 and start being something they've never encountered before. We're not trying to win a war, Admiral. We're trying to win the right to be taken seriously. Admiral Juan stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Get me those 6 hours. Reyes opened a broadcast channel to the Vorkai fleet. She sat alone at the transmission desk. No generals behind her, no show of force. Just her. Calm. Commander Drakvel. This is Commander Asha Reyes of the United Earth Defense Council. We received your transmission. Drakvel appeared on the screen. He looked mildly surprised she was alone. You respond quickly. Most species take longer to coordinate their governments. Usually they spend the first 30 hours arguing. We argued. We just argued faster than you expected. A flicker of something crossed Drakvel's face. Not quite amusement. Interest. And your answer? Our answer is that we require more time. A decision of this magnitude, affecting 8 billion people across 200 nations, cannot be made by one person in one room. Our systems of governance require consensus. You are stalling. I'm governing. Commander, I've studied your history. Before the Vorkai accepted the founding compact of your own empire, the Concord of Seven, your Supreme Council requested 40 hours of deliberation. A decision affecting 7 billion of your own people. We are asking for 30 additional hours to make a decision affecting 8 billion of ours. I'd call that relatively efficient. A longer pause. Drakvel leaned back slightly in his command chair. You have read our history. We've been listening to your transmissions for 19 years. We try to understand people before we meet them. Drakvel studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. It was still not respect. But it was no longer contempt. 30 additional hours. Not 1 minute more. He closed the channel. 30 hours. She had bought 30 hours. Combined with the 31 already elapsed, that gave them 61 hours total. Holdfast needed 61 hours and 40 minutes. Reyes went back to Torres. I need 40 minutes. From what? From somewhere. I don't care where. Find me 40 minutes of calibration time. Torres stared at his data tablet. Ran calculations. Looked up. If we skip the safety buffer on nodes 12 through 17, we can cut 43 minutes off the calibration cycle. What's the risk? Those 6 nodes might burn out after the first pulse. The network would be non-functional afterward. We only need 1 pulse. Yeah, we do. For the next 60 hours. Earth went quiet in a way it never had before. No protests. No emergency summits broadcast on television. No political speeches. Just work. 8 billion people somehow, by instinct, understood that the time for words was over. Not every one of them knew about Holdfast. Most didn't. But every one of them knew that somewhere, someone was working. And for now, that was enough. Coherence at 89%. All 20 nodes were synchronized. The screens showed energy levels climbing. 71%. 78%. 82%. 89%. Commander, this is real. This is actually real. How long until Dracvel's deadline? 11 minutes. Reyes picked up the transmission channel. Dracvel answered immediately, as if he had been waiting. Your time is nearly concluded, Commander Reyes. Has your planet reached a decision? We have. She looked directly into the transmission camera. Her expression was calm. Completely, unnervingly calm. The answer is no. 3 full seconds of silence on the alien bridge. Then cold fury. You were warned. He turned to his weapons officer. Target their population centers. Begin orbital. Commander. Something in her voice made him stop. Before you give that order, I want you to check your sensor readings. He glanced at his tactical officer, who was already staring at his screens with confusion. Commander, we're reading energy signatures. On the surface. Multiple sources. All across the planet. They're synchronizing. Identify the source. The Shot Heard Round the World, 1775. April 18, 1775. British General Thomas Gage in Boston receives intelligence. Colonial militias are storing weapons in the town of Concord. He orders British troops to march out under cover of darkness and seize them. But the colonists have a warning system. That night, Paul Revere and William Dawes ride through the countryside, alerting militia members that British troops are coming. The British are coming! Though historically, Revere likely said something more like, the regulars are coming out, since most colonists still considered themselves British too. At dawn on April 19th, British troops reached the town of Lexington. Waiting for them on the town green are about 70 armed colonial militiamen. Nobody knows, even today, exactly who fired first. But a shot rings out. Then more. In minutes, 8 colonial militiamen are dead. The British continue marching to Concord. At Concord, something remarkable happens. Hundreds of armed colonial militia have gathered. At the North Bridge, colonial forces actually fire upon and repel British soldiers, forcing them to retreat. And then the retreat becomes a nightmare for the British. As they march back toward Boston, colonial militia fire on them from behind trees, stone walls, and buildings along the entire route, guerrilla tactics the disciplined British infantry isn't prepared for. By the end of the day, the British have suffered far heavier casualties than the colonists. This is it. April 19, 1775. The shot heard round the world. The Revolutionary War has begun, even though nobody has declared independence yet. News spreads through the colonies within days. Militia from across New England converge on Boston, effectively trapping the British Army inside the city. In June 1775, the colonists fortified Breed's Hill near Boston. The British launch a frontal assault in what becomes known, slightly inaccurately, as the Battle of Bunker Hill. The British eventually take the hill, but at horrific cost, over 1,000 casualties. The colonists prove something important: they can stand and fight against the world's most powerful army. That same month, the Continental Congress makes a critical decision. They create the Continental Army and appoint a Virginia planter and veteran of the French and Indian War as its commander, George Washington. Washington isn't chosen because he's the most brilliant tactician available. He's chosen because he's respected, because he's from Virginia, which helps unite southern colonies with the New England Rebellion, and because he has the bearing of a leader people will follow. Now here's the part the Thanksgiving pageant conveniently leaves out. The Pilgrims survived their first year largely because of the help of the Wampanoag people, particularly a man named Tisquantum, known to history as Squanto, who had himself been kidnapped by English explorers years earlier, sold into slavery in Spain, escaped to England, and eventually made his way back to his homeland, only to find his own village wiped out by a disease epidemic, likely introduced by earlier European contact. Squanto taught the Pilgrims how to plant corn using fish as fertilizer, where to fish, and helped broker a fragile peace and alliance with the Wampanoag leader Massasoit. An alliance born not out of warm friendship but out of strategic necessity. The Wampanoag had themselves been devastated by a recent epidemic, possibly losing up to 90% of their population in some areas in the years just before the Pilgrims arrived, and Massasoit saw an alliance with the English as a potential counterweight against rival tribes. The first Thanksgiving of 1621 was real, in the sense that a harvest celebration involving both English colonists and Wampanoag guests did happen. But it was not a symbol of harmonious coexistence. It was a single moment of fragile diplomatic convenience between two groups who, within a single generation, would be locked in one of the most brutal conflicts in early American history. King Philip's War of 1675–76, which proportionally killed a higher percentage of the New England population than any war in American history since, including the Civil War. That's the part they never taught you. The feast wasn't the relationship. It was a brief calm before a storm that would, within 50 years, devastate indigenous New England and nearly wipe out the English colonies as well. Let's talk about the single deadliest force in the entire colonization of the Americas, deadlier than starvation, deadlier than warfare, deadlier than the worst winter, disease. European colonists carried smallpox, measles, influenza, and a dozen other pathogens that indigenous American populations had never encountered and had zero immunity to. The result was demographic devastation on a scale that's almost impossible to comprehend. Some historians estimate indigenous populations in parts of the Americas declined by 90% or more within a century of sustained contact, not primarily from violence, but from disease moving ahead of the settlers themselves, sometimes racing through entire regions before a single European had even arrived there in person. This matters enormously to the colonial survival story, because it means the empty land the English found wasn't empty by nature, it was emptied. Some of the very fields the Pilgrims found already cleared near Plymouth had belonged to Wampanoag communities devastated by disease outbreaks in the years just before 1620. But disease cut both ways, even if far less severely. Colonists themselves, packed into unsanitary, crowded settlements with poor water sources, suffered constant outbreaks of dysentery, typhoid, and other illnesses. Childhood mortality in colonial America was staggering by modern standards. In many colonial communities, it's estimated that 1 in 4 children didn't survive to age 5, and women faced significant risk of death in childbirth throughout the entire colonial period. This is the reality television and movies almost never show you. colonial life wasn't just occasionally dangerous. Death was a constant, looming presence in every single household, every single year, for generations. Families routinely buried multiple children. Multiple wives died in childbirth to the same husband over a lifetime. This wasn't tragedy in the way we understand tragedy today, sudden, exceptional, devastating. It was simply Tuesday. Let's talk about daily life for those who did survive, because survival itself was a full-time, physically punishing occupation. A colonial farming family woke before sunrise and worked until well after dark, 6 days a week, with Sunday reserved for church, which, in Puritan New England, could itself involve sitting through hours of sermons in unheated meeting houses, in winter, with attendance often legally mandatory. Clearing land for farming meant removing old-growth forests by hand. Felling massive trees with axes, then often burning or slowly rotting out the stumps over years, since most colonists couldn't afford the labor or tools to remove them quickly. A single family might spend a literal decade just getting one farm's worth of land into full productive use. Water had to be hauled. Fires had to be tended constantly, because a fire going out in winter could genuinely mean death by exposure, and starting a new one from scratch with flint and steel was slow, difficult work, especially with wet tinder. Food preservation meant salting, smoking, and pickling, exhausting, time-consuming labor with zero margin for error, because spoiled food in winter could mean starvation. Clothing was handmade from start to finish in most households. Carding wool, spinning thread, weaving cloth, then cutting and sewing it, an enormous time investment for every single garment a family wore. Soap was made by hand from animal fat and wood ash. Candles were dipped by hand, one at a time. And all of this labor happened while also facing the very real, ever-present threats we've already discussed: disease, food insecurity in bad harvest years, and in many regions, ongoing conflict with indigenous nations whose land was being steadily taken. So where does this leave us, in 1777? 13 colonies have transformed into a fragile, struggling nation. They've survived their darkest hour, but the war is far from over. Ahead lies Valley Forge, the alliance with France, years more of brutal fighting, and ultimate victory at Yorktown in 1781. But that's a story for another video. What strikes me most about this period, 1763 to 1777, is how unlikely it all was. A patchwork of colonies with different economies, religions, and interests, united by shared grievance into something resembling a nation. Ordinary farmers and tradesmen standing against the world's most powerful military. A revolution that began not with grand declarations, but with attacks on stamped paper. History often feels inevitable looking backward. It rarely felt that way to the people living through it. If you found this story compelling, make sure to subscribe. Because next, we're covering the war's brutal middle years, the winter at Valley Forge, and the alliance that changed everything. Thanks for watching.